Whether you're hitting the road or kicking back in the cab, it's time to take a load off with Big Rig Banter. Powered by AllTruckJobs.com, your source for finding the trucking jobs drivers really want. Get ready to shift into gear and let the conversations roll.
Hello and welcome. This is the 10th episode of Big Rig Banter, and I'm your co-host Connor Smith.
And I'm your co-host Troy Diffenderfer, and today we're going to tackle winter driving safety. We're going to talk about some tips and tricks, and we're even going to hear from Jim Ward, Safety Director over at Transervice, so stay tuned for that.
But first, let's hear about some recent news in the trucking world.
All right, folks, and we only have one news topic for today, but it's a good one. The wait is finally over. After months of teasing investors and fans that his company's first electric semi will blow your mind, according to CEO Elon Musk, he finally took off the wraps of the truck, and actually he rolled into the unveiling in Hawthorne, California, sitting in the cab of a new Tesla semi. With a slick design that will allow truckers to stand in the cab, Musk and his team believe that the electric semi will give drivers a far better experience and increase safety and significantly reduce the costs. But Connor, I know you dug into some of the more specific details of the truck. What do you have for us?
That's right. So as you mentioned, Elon Musk did roll up in the truck. They are real. He's actually driving one, and they're going into production in 2019. But like you mentioned also, drivers are going to be able to stand up in the cab because it doesn't have a giant diesel motor anymore. It's all electric, and one of the most interesting features actually is that the steering wheel is centered. So instead of being on the left side in the US and other places or the right in Europe, it's directly in the middle with these nice heads-up displays on either side. And these trucks are going to be able to connect directly into a fleet management system, allowing drivers and companies to route and remotely monitor their Tesla trucks. Additionally, you'll be able to tether multiple trucks together eventually when you get a whole fleet of these things going. So that's pretty cool. Next, you have the autopilot feature, which is the second generation of Tesla's semi-autonomous system. It's going to feature automatic braking, lane changing, and lane departure warnings. So, if a driver is veering off into the lane by accident, it'll prompt you and tell you to correct your driving. An interesting feature as well is the armored glass on the windshield. So, there's been recent types of terror attacks and things where people are actually using trucks as weapons, and to have the armored glass on there might be a nice feature for that. I can also see it kind of working against if somebody hijacks one of these things and it's bulletproof, but then again, that's a different conversation entirely. So I digress. The main selling point of these trucks is that they can travel 500 miles on a single charge. It can haul 80,000 pounds in a single go. And like I mentioned, without the large diesel engine, drivers actually sit farther forward in the cab. So it's a lot more spacious and drivers can actually stand up in it. So that kind of makes me think maybe we'll have some interesting Troy Thunder workouts in the Tesla cab eventually if we can do maybe some like pull-ups or something now.
That would be cool. I think I'll be able to get a hold of him and see if he'd be interested in that.
Yeah, just tweet him or whatever. But, the first edition of these trucks will not include a sleeper compartment. So that's just something to be aware of if you're thinking about investing in these. But overall, they're projected to be cheaper than traditional trucks, actually. So how they're going to pull that off really is yet to be seen, but with 4,000 Americans dying in truck-related collisions every year, the goal, obviously, of these trucks is to increase safety with a lot of the autopilot features and things like that, so we'll just have to see how they play out, but it's looking pretty cool.
Yeah, and they really did wow the investors. We've talked about on our previous podcast, all on automated trucking, about some of the other players, whether it's Nikola or Mack Truck or Uber kind of throwing their hat in the ring, but Tesla seemed to really wow the critics and is definitely put themselves in as the forerunner when it comes to the automated truck race.
As to be expected, yeah. Somebody had to do it first, and they finally got there. So
For sure.
we'll keep covering this as more things develop and as we learn more about this truck. So yeah, and again, if you want to go back and check out our episode before this one, it's all about autonomous trucking, where we talk about the different levels of autonomy, how this is going to affect the industry, and what you can expect with these self-driving trucks and other technologies in that same vein. But now on to our main topic for today. It's winter driving tips. So, as you know, it's December, and we're gearing up for the usual winter here on the East Coast, but that takes a lot of preparation. It takes a lot of skill building over time if you're a driver or if you're new to the industry. And we just thought we'd break into providing some information for, drivers during the winter season.
All right, and Connor, why don't we start where it all begins, which is preparing your rig, and that's before you hit the road. There's a bunch of things you should look at. You can make yourself a little checklist with what we talk about, but keep these things in mind before you start your journey. The first thing you should look at is your battery. Cold weather drains batteries fast, so check the age and the strength of your battery. You can do this kind of by starting the engine multiple times, or there's tools you can get to actually plug into your battery and check the life of it. Fuel additives are another thing you should check. Every driver knows that diesel fuel can gel in extreme cold, but not everyone knows why. It's due to paraffin, which is a hydrocarbon found in diesel. Paraffin crystallizes in freezing temperatures, allowing any water in that fuel to emulsify and turn the diesel into slush. The solution is to use winter blend fuel with a high cetane rating and add anti-gel additives at each fill up.
That's right. And next, you're going to want to look at cooling systems. Yes, even though it's cold weather outside, cooling systems are very important to get checked for the way that they function in regard to your radiator, the belts, and the hoses in your rig. So, if you don't have a proper cooling system working and it's not maintaining the right temperatures for those components, you can experience failures. So what's recommended is checking the coolant to see if it's at the optimum freeze point, and then you'll know whether or not your cooling system is ready for colder winter conditions. Next is your fuel filter and water separator. So for this, you want to monitor the truck's water separator daily and drain it when full to avoid contamination. That just also means replacing old fuel filters. That protects the engine as well.
Another one is the air dryer. The air dryer prevents water from entering the brake lines where it can freeze. You guys will be out on the road in icy conditions where using your brakes are going to be crucial and frequent. So make sure it works and be sure to change the filter if needed. And also check out your engine block heater. Since diesel engines require a higher cylinder temperature than gasoline vehicles, they're harder to start in the winter. And make sure when you do start it, you let it idle a while. You want to kind of warm up your rig and ease it into driving mode, similar to you do with your regular vehicle. Drivers who travel a lot through the coldest parts of the country should consider an electric engine block heater to use when the truck is parked for long periods of time as well.
Another huge thing to check for is your tire pressure. Because cold weather can cause underinflated tires, they're prone to wearing faster and it can hurt your mileage overall. So always be sure to check your tire pressure and adjust that inflation accordingly. And so this kind of brings us into our next little section here. It's emergency supplies. So those are definitely good to take inventory of before you even get on the road or you're even planning your next haul. Breakdowns in the summer are inconvenient, but breakdowns in the winter can actually be dangerous. So having the right emergency supplies can really make a difference, sometimes between life and death. And whether that's for you as a commercial driver yourself or other drivers on the road, it's also something to consider. Is a lot of people aren't as prepared as maybe commercial drivers are going to be for weather conditions, and having enough emergency supplies for your own self and maybe even some extras for other drivers on the road is something we can recommend at least. So Troy, what are some pieces of safety equipment that we can remind drivers to bring on the road with them?
Yeah, Connor, there's a handful of things you should always carry as far as safety equipment. The first one being reflectors. Obviously, if you're stopped or if you would happen to get in an accident, reflectors are a good way to increase visibility, whether it's people going around you and steering clear of you, or people coming to help, whether it's a tow truck or someone else in your fleet. Reflectors allow you to be visible while still kind of drawing attention to yourself so people can avoid you. Another one is tire chains. And Connor, I know you dug into some research as far as the laws and regulations about using and carrying tire chains.
Yep, that's right. They basically vary on a state-by-state basis. Some, are only permitted during the worst weather, whereas others have actually a range of dates that you can use them within. It really has to do with whether or not a road is paved. And actually, in states like Alaska, you have to obtain a permit from the government to actually use them. So, if you're driving across different states, just be sure to check out their specific laws regarding tire chains.
Yeah, and this is mostly because if you're using chains on a road that doesn't have snow, it can damage both your vehicle and the infrastructure of the road, which is why many states are putting in these regulations just to save them some money when it comes to road repairs.
Yep, that's absolutely right. So yeah, just keep that in mind as you're driving across different states this winter.
Yeah, and similar to reflectors, you should also have flares with you. These will increase your visibility as well. And the final piece of safety equipment you should always carry is rock salt. You might get in a tricky situation where you might get stuck in the snow, and rock salt is essential for getting out, as well as tire chains. You can put rock salt in front of or in back of your tires and hopefully melt the snow enough that you can get back on your way.
Another good thing to use rock salt for is just to put it on, the step up to your cab when you're exiting and entering your truck.
For sure.
You can slip and just fall down, and that wouldn't be good. So sprinkle a little bit of that before you go to bed, and you should be good in the morning then.
Yeah, so let's look at a survival kit. I know, unfortunately, some truck drivers get stuck overnight in the snow, and it's important to have the essentials for staying comfortable and safe overnight when you are trapped on the road. But Connor, why don't you start us off?
All right, so survival kit. You don't exactly need a Man versus Wild Bear Grylls type of kit here, but covering the basics is essential, really. The first thing, obviously, is food and water. So try to bring extra food, non-perishable, obviously, because, you're probably going to be storing this for an extended period of time, but it's just to have it in the right event, or the wrong event, really.
For sure, and you never know when your rig will break down and you might not be able to heat something up. It's not just getting stuck in the snow. Trucks break down every single day, so you might not be with electricity. So it's important to have things that you can eat that are somewhat nutritious and don't need cooking or don't need a lot of preparation.
Right, and with that, bring some extra water along. Just have some sealed jugs of water. Next up, you're going to want to bring some blankets, maybe one of those mummy sleeping bags, because, if you don't have power in your rig, if it breaks down or whatever the situation is, even if you are in an accident or something like that, or other drivers are in accidents, the initial impact can actually cause people to go into shock a lot of the time. So giving them a blanket to kind of stabilize their body temperature is a good thing just to have on hand. You can get one of those small, silver emergency blanket type of things, or just bring extras, whatever fits in your cab,
And next is batteries. And I think this is one of the most forgotten about essential items of the safety kit. Nowadays, we kind of charge everything and can just plug everything into an outlet. But if you do lose power, batteries are going to be essential. And that just doesn't mean your regular AAA or AA batteries. It's nice to have a spare phone battery as well that's already charged. If you need to communicate with your boss or friends or family or someone that's going to be helping you out, having a spare phone battery is going to be crucial. And it's essential, especially if you don't have electricity in your rig.
And on that same note, if you can afford it, maybe bring an extra battery for your rig itself, because...
For sure.
Obviously, like we mentioned, you should prepare ahead of time to have a healthy battery in your truck, but, something could go wrong or another driver could be in need. We're all about just kind of preparing for yourself and others, because there's nothing worse than being on the road and feeling stranded. So, so next, you'll also want to bring, different types of lamps, or like we mentioned, flares, or even glow sticks. Just some other form of light that doesn't require electricity to run, because if you need to make a quick repair to your rig, or you need to find something in your rig or outside, or just signal to other people, having something that will reliably emit light for you is really nice to have. You'll You'll also want to bring obviously a radio or a phone charger or a combination of both. They make those little hand crank ones. So if anybody's listening to this and needs an idea for their trucker for the holidays, maybe a nice hand crank radio or phone survival sort of device would be nice. But yeah, those can really come in at a moment's notice to help a lot.
Yeah, and next, a multi-tool is also a great gift for the holidays, as well as an essential item to bring with. You never know if you're going to need to cut something or screw something or unscrew something, but a multi-tool is something just to have anytime and not just while in your rig. It's something small that you can fit in your pocket or in the center console of your rig, but you can never go wrong having too many tools in your rig, I believe. And if you have little repairs that need to be made, a multi-tool is a great item to have.
Absolutely. Next, definitely be sure to bring a first aid kit. I mean, that should have been a little higher up on our list, honestly, but you're hearing it now. First aid kits are essential, especially if, like we mentioned, if there's an accident or something and you need to use it or someone else needs to use it. Just having, antiseptic, gauze, whatever it's going to be inside of that kit is really important to keep that fully stocked. And another thing to note with that is that you should always check the expiration date of your medical kits, just to make sure that none of the products inside of it have gone bad, because they will need replacing. It's not safe to use them at a certain point. And finally, you might want to consider bringing some extra sunglasses if it's snowy weather and you actually have to get out of your cab and walk to find civilization or whatever it would be. Having a designated pair of sunglasses can help you make a long trek and avoid eye fatigue, so that you can actually see where you're going. That or goggles, I guess. But yeah, so those are your basic items for your survival kit. If you guys have any suggestions for what you should include or what you personally include in your survival kit, feel free to reach out to us on Facebook or Twitter at Big Rig Banter. So now we're going to talk about plotting your route and the hazards that you may encounter. Ideally, you're going to hear about most of this through the CB radio regarding the conditions that are lying ahead and what to avoid. But really, it's about responding to road conditions the proper way and in the way that you've been trained and how you've learned. So what can you tell us about that, Troy?
Yeah, this is something that driving companies and drivers constantly talk about, and I'm sure that Jim is going to mention it when we talk to him later in the podcast, but you need to know when to pull over. One of the biggest things that will get a driver in trouble is thinking that they have the time and the power to make it through a particularly treacherous route. Your safety in life will always supersede whatever you're hauling, so always make sure you're looking out for your best interest. We know, just keep in mind for yourself. Again, it's just a job. I know you want to do your job to the best of your ability, but you have to look out for your own personal safety. It's also a good idea to listen to the radio. Not only will you hear weather advisories from your local stations, but you should always be listening to your fellow truckers on the CB radio as well. They might be in front of you and already have a good idea of what you can expect in the route ahead, as well as there's some apps that you can download that will also kind of give you a heads up to any accidents on the road or particularly dangerous conditions.
And we'll have a link to some of those in the description below.
Yep, but in case you are befelled by those treacherous conditions, if you get in an accident or you get stranded, Connor, I know you have some tips and tricks for that as well.
Right, so if you're in an accident or you're stranded, it's best to try to remain in your rig as much as you can. With frigid temperatures, low visibility, and icing conditions, being out on the road without the protection of your rig can actually be very dangerous. If you have a phone, make sure to call for help as soon as possible. Inform your dispatcher or your company, what's going on. If you feel like you might have to make a prolonged stay in your rig, then, as we mentioned earlier, make sure to have that survival kit handy so that you can make it through the night at least. And then if you do decide to venture out of your rig, make sure to set up some flares so that the first responders will see you, and to alert other drivers as well.
Yeah, and if you do need to communicate with your dispatchers or delivery points, you'll also want to let them know if you're going to be late. Most places will be understanding if you give them a heads up, but not letting them know you're going to be late can turn pretty sour pretty quickly. It's also important to make sure the conditions for offloading are okay. Slippery conditions or low visibility can be very dangerous when you're pulling in, especially if you're around other truckers. Watch your footing and make sure to communicate as much as possible so you can prevent any potential hazards.
That's right. So that's a lot of the basics there. I mean, I'm sure a lot of you guys probably have experienced these sort of things in the past and obviously have more experience with it than we do. But we just thought we'd kind of provide a friendly reminder about, what to consider driving in the winter because, people can panic and you can blank on what you need to do. So just having a nice sort of gentle reminder as far as safety is concerned, it's good every so often.
For sure. And you've heard us talk all this time, but let's bring in an expert, Connor. We were lucky enough to talk with Jim Ward, who is a director of safety at Transervice, and let's hear what Jim had to say.
All right, we're here with James Ward and Sean Schnipper, and we're here today discussing winter driving tips. Guys, thanks for coming on the show. We really appreciate it.
No problem, of course.
So, first, would you like to tell our listeners a little bit about your company and what you guys do?
Well, we're a contract carrier and a full-service maintenance company. We do a lot. It's basically logistics. We do a lot of third-party carriage and maintenance for some of the larger. We do some of the larger grocery companies and also some of the compressed gas companies, as well as a major hardware chain, amongst other things.
Very good. Okay. So our first question, the winter months are coming up and drivers, need to prepare for what's ahead. So what are some things that, you recommend drivers do to prepare their rigs for winter when they're hauling your products? And, what are some concerns that you have for winter driving conditions?
We basically have the guys, each driver, whatever part of the season it is, we always tell them to make sure that they have pre-trip and post-trip all of their vehicles. And if there's anything that comes up to, report it immediately to the maintenance department. As far as, winter driving, the trucks are all pretty much set up. A lot of them have block heaters and things of that nature to keep the truck from, when they get into it in the morning, it's ready to roll and start up. Some of the locations we have do use chains, but it's not something that they use on a regular basis. We've not really run into doing that too often. As far as the vehicles are concerned, we have, maintenance departments that handle that. But of course, they'll check all the fluids and make sure that everything is in working order. As far as, the oil, the antifreeze, they'll prep the vehicle for the season as opposed to, they'll use a different mixture during the winter than they do during the summer or the fall. And they, obviously they'll check all the tires and things of that nature. Each vehicle is PM'd on a regular basis. So if tires need changing, especially drive tires, before the winter months, they'll do that. All of the vehicles, they keep flares, triangle kits on the vehicles along with fire extinguishers. And some of them, we do have some sleeper units that have heating units on them as well. Some of the trucks, depending on the location, some of the guys will have various other things, such as a shovel kit or things of that nature in case they get stuck and they need to dig out. But in most cases, we will utilize an outside wrecker service if it's before rather to be safe than sorry.
Yeah, you mentioned a lot of different items they carry as far as chains and flares and reflective triangles. Are there any other items you find especially useful when your drivers are out in winter conditions? I know we've definitely heard that a lot of people carry survival kits, whether it's food and water and kind of extra stuff like that. But is there anything, I don't know if they have a checklist that they need to carry specific items, or is it kind of just everyone kind of knows what to carry with them?
some of the most of the locations we have are, we do have some operations that run cross country. So they have their first aid kits in the truck. Some of them may have sand. But for the most part, it's basically location specific. So if we have some of the locations where they run over the road, they may require them to carry, chains. They'll require them to carry, specific things, like you said, like water and stuff of that nature. We really don't run, except say for our one location up in Oregon, we really don't run in rural areas where there's not help isn't nearby.
Right.
A lot of the stuff we do, we have accounts with wrecker services, so that should somebody break down or get caught in the snow or the ice, we have national accounts across the country with different wrecker services that we use. As far as specific items to keep in the truck, from my point of view, I don't know of anybody that requires them to have water or food. Mm-hmm. But by all means, especially the over-the-road drivers, they have small refrigerators, I believe, in all of the sleepers. So they bring snacks and I'm sure water and drinks with them. For how many days they will last, I couldn't tell you. But again, a lot of the areas that we run, we'll run through some rural highways, but we don't really get up into the mountains or anything to that effect where we're not ready for, we're totally out of the way. So we really haven't run into anything issues like that. I mean, obviously we run into the occasional deer here or there, but that's about it.
Right. So kind of speaking of that, what are some main mistakes that you see maybe younger drivers or less experienced drivers who have to drive in winter? What mistakes do you see them making commonly?
Well, from looking at inexperience, I mean, we get obviously all of the different collisions and accidents that come across my desk. I think a lot of it has to do in winter driving is speed, being aware of the situation, especially if you're going under overpasses. Well, let's say you're driving on the west side of a mountain when the sun is coming up, it's going to be all shaded. Mm-hmm. And what happens is you run into a lot of black ice. Where we have some locations in upstate New York, and like I said, in other northern climates where black ice is prevalent, and we also have a lot of locations in the Midwest that run through the I-80 corridor, so they'll get a lot of ice. So obviously speed is one of the factors. It may not necessarily just be in young drivers, but even some of the older drivers who get more complacent as they get older.
Absolutely.
Run into, we don't really get into jackknifing that often. In the winter, when we do have them, it usually is due to black ice. Mm-hmm. They're driving down a dry road and they come across a curve, or they're going up they're going under an overpass, and that's where you'll lose it because, you don't realize that there's no spray coming up from the road. And as you go under that overpass, it's shaded, and it's the one place where you're not going to have melt off as you would on a highway on an exposed section of the highway where it's hitting it.
Right.
That's really where we get, as far as, common mistakes in the winter, it would be, things that happen like that. More, the more serious stuff would be black ice, jackknives. Then we also have the making a turn too short and running over a snow berm. When the roads are plowed, you'll get these. We do a lot of backing into locations and, pulling back and forth and forward. It'll do a little bit of damage to the truck, but it's still something that should be, watched out for is when they're backing and pulling forward, and especially in narrow locations, that they'll hit these snow mounds that were made by the plow. And believe it or not, let that freeze up a little bit and you can rip a bumper off or crack a fender.
Oh, geez.
See that happen as well.
And what's the worst winter storm you've ever encountered up there? I know New York gets a lot of snow. Is there anyone that sticks out that really kind of put the brakes on all of trucking?
I wouldn't know by name. We've had guys, not only in New York, we actually had Indiana, I think it was in it was either the beginning of 16 or the end of 15, where we had a large snowstorm where they had a state of emergency and they shut everything down. And then we had guys that were stranded on the road, and basically what they had to do is find a safe haven, whether it was a motel or, wherever they can go to get off the road, because they shut everything down in a state of emergency. And we've had that happen here in New York as well, with some of our locations. But again, it really falls to the guys who are in the date cabs, the guys who are just running out for their, 10 or 11-hour day and coming back. Those are the guys, you're more concerned for them because they don't have a place to, hunker down in the back of a sleeper. But we have run into some pretty large storms. We recently, in the beginning of 2015, we were involved in a serious collision in Tennessee. It was multi-vehicle, and it was because what happened was the people were driving on warm, wet roadways, and they come over the top of a hill, and it's a sheet of ice. So everybody started spinning like they were on ice skates. And when you've got a truck that's loaded with grocery or whatever it might be, and you just come over the hill, and that happens whether you're doing 30 or 40 miles an hour, there's no way to stop. So that's, it doesn't necessarily have to be snow. A lot of times it is ice that's really our nemesis, because you can't control it, you can't stop on it. It's hard enough to stop a 4-wheel vehicle. An 18-wheel vehicle is a lot more difficult.
Absolutely.
So again, snow will shut us down. Fortunately, we have a lot of drivers that are very experienced. They've dealt with the weather. Especially, most of our locations are north of the Mason-Dixon line. As far as our transportation locations, we only have 1 or 2 that are below, in the South Carolina area. So everything else is pretty much Kentucky and north, Louisville and north. We do run into a lot of mixed weather. And, we send out newsletters, we use videos, things that really would be helpful to what to look for, when they're running into these situations. And obviously the most part is to protect themselves and the public. So obviously one of the first things we tell them is, lower your speed, which is, without saying, probably one of the most important things to do.
Right.
But just overall be more cautious, and, stay out of, high-speed situations. Try to keep your distance, especially when the weather is, iffy, whether it's freezing rain, even if it's just rain, but it's cold out. You never know when you're going to hit a patch or when somebody else in front of you loses control. So that's what we try to tell them, is to keep their distance. Sometimes we're just in the wrong place at the wrong time, and that guy loses control, and he's off to our right rear, and he comes up behind us and runs under the back wheel. It's happened before. I'm sure it's happened to everybody. But that's, we try to, push the issue with, again, I keep saying it, but speed is the issue. Just keep it low and keep it lower than the speed limit if the weather's, not perfect, so to speak.
Awesome. Well, that's a lot of great information, and I'm sure our listeners are really going to appreciate just having a nice review. And again, thanks guys for coming on the program and talking with us. Before we wrap things up, is there anything you'd like listeners to know about your company?
We are constantly hiring, recruiting multiple drivers, technicians, mechanics from all locations throughout the United States. So our website is www.transervice, transervice.com. So feel free to stop by at any time to look at our website, look at our career page. A lot of great information on there.
Perfect. That's awesome. Thanks, guys. Really appreciate the time.
Okay, thank you, guys.
All right, and now it's time for our fun section. And of course, now that we're in the full swing of the holiday season, we're going to bring you our top gifts for truckers. So Troy, what is under your truckin' Christmas tree this year?
Yeah, Connor and I have picked a few gifts out from a blog that you can find on AllTruckJobs.com, the Trucker's Holiday Gift Guide. And my first gift I would choose is probably the XM satellite radio. You know, Connor and I are both big music fans, and I think if I was on the road, I'd want some good music to listen to, and whether it's music, sports, politics, and even shows about trucking that you can listen to, of course, after you listen to ours. Sirius XM Radio offers a lot of great channels to listen to, and the most convenient part is you don't have to be flipping through local radio stations constantly. You'll be able to get it pretty much anywhere. But Connor, what about your holiday gift?
I would choose the GPS device because on the same note there, it'll work anywhere. It's all through a satellite. Maybe you can get both of these things combined. I don't even know, but having a GPS in the event of winter hazards or, if your navigation system itself, the one that you already have in your truck, goes out, it can be good to have a backup, or just for your personal car at home. If you're driving around town and you're used to having that nice navigation system in the front of your dash there, then having a GPS device is really convenient.
For sure. And, we're both thinking about things on the road, but it got me thinking of what we can get truckers to do in their free time, and I thought a great gift would be a Kindle. If your favorite trucker is a bibliophile, a Kindle can be the perfect gift so they can satisfy their literature needs on the road. You don't have a lot of space while on the road, so keeping a bookcase full of books can be pretty tough, but a Kindle offers a library of literally hundreds of thousands of books, and you can read everything from Mark Twain to Stephen King while on the road.
Yeah, that sounds good. And of course, another solid gift idea, like we mentioned, is a safety kit. You can't go wrong with that. And, it really shows a trucker that you care about them if you're thinking about their safety. So, not only will that come in use somewhere down the line, but just having that is definitely going to be useful. It'll include basic stuff like, your reflectors, lights, ice scrapers, a window breaking hammer type of thing, a fire extinguisher, and just first aid supplies. So, having that is really useful and thoughtful.
And Connor, we've been talking about all these gifts that we can give truckers, but I know me and you were working on a gift for a while for our trucking audience. Why don't you unwrap that gift for our listeners?
Well, that's right. So, as Troy mentioned, we're both big music fans. So we took the time, actually, this year to write a trucking song that we're going to be debuting right here on this program. This is the only place you can hear it at the moment, but we're going to have it up on different streaming services. You'll find it elsewhere on the internet with the links below. But yeah, it was an interesting process here. Troy and I just kind of sat down in our podcast studio, and he wrote the lyrics, I did the music. So here is Christmas in the Cab.
On our 22, where the man says don't forget your boots. It's Christmas Eve and I'm 3 states away. Honey, there's only one thing to say. I won't be home for Christmas. Me and Saint Nick are hitting the road. I'm sorry, baby, I'm spending Christmas in the cab tonight. Me and the man in red got 1,000 miles to go. I'm spending Christmas in the cab. Rudolph's passed out in the back. Naughty and nice, who's keeping track? 18 wheels is a hell of a sleigh. There's only one thing left to say. I won't be home for Christmas. Me and Saint Nick are hitting the road. I'm sorry, baby, I'm spending Christmas in the cab tonight. Me 1,000 miles to go. I'm spending Christmas in the cab.
All right, so there you have it. I hope you guys enjoyed that track. And again, from all of us here at Big Rig Banter, have a happy holiday season. And next time we're going to be talking about recruiting millennial drivers. So be sure to tune in to that episode. But thanks for listening. I'm your co-host, Connor Smith.
And I'm Troy Diffenderfer.
And this has been Big Rig Banter.
Thanks for tuning in to another edition of Big Rig Banter. For your next job, check out AllTruckJobs.com, the premier online source for finding the best driver jobs in the country. Browse hundreds of positions by freight or driver type to get back on the road with confidence. Click subscribe to keep the conversations coming. Until next time on Big Rig Banter.